he once sat to preside over crucial matters of the country. But beyond the roll call of members that constitute the Council of States, critical matters that portray the state of the nation were discussed. The council condemned the violence that marred last week's nationwide protests. They also commended Nigerians for resisting the manipulations of some elements pushing for unconstitutional regime change.
After the NSA's briefing, generally he allayed everybody's fears and spoke on the tightness of the security around the country, and also reassured all and sundry that nobody will be allowed to truncate our hard-earned democracy.
Overall, President Bola Tinubu got thumbs up from the Council of State. His reforms and policies, though yet to fully manifest, are being implemented in the interests of Nigerians.
There was an executive session between members of the Nigerian Governors Forum and Mr. President. And frank and fruitful discussions were held between both parties. And I'm glad to say we're on the right track.
The coordinating minister of the economy reported an optimistic economic outlook, but pointed out President Bola Tinubu's dissatisfaction with the high inflation.
In broad terms, the economy is growing. The balance of payments, in particular, the trade balance and the current account balance, are in surplus. The exchange rate is stabilizing. And inflation, though high, uncomfortably high for the liking of Mr. President and his team, it is slowing and it is set to fall.
The governors later met privately with President Bola Tinubu on the sidelines of the Council of State meeting to discuss some undisclosed issues. The last time the Council of State meeting was held was in February last year, in the build-up to the general election. The unanimous vote of confidence passed on President Bola Tinubu by the Council of States and the Nigeria Governors Forum may be a much-needed encouragement as his administration continues to implement necessary economic reforms that the government says will improve the well-being of citizens. Femi Akonde, TVC News, Abuja.
So yes, we can open with this discussion based on those reports. Babajide, let me quickly come to you on this. First off, we understand that the Minister of Steel Development, Dele Alake, will describe the protests as...
It's not the Minister of Steel Development.
Minister of Solid Minerals, apologies. Solid Minerals, I meant to say. Describe the protest as a movement, that is targeted at change of regime through unconstitutional means. But some have argued that that position wasn't taken in good light. How would you react to this?
You see, there are different tendencies within the group who came together to protest. There were those who came in simply to use the opportunity to loot. We saw that in Kano, in Gombe, Katsina, and other places. Gigawa. There were those who wanted to protest in a peaceful manner, in a manner in conformity with our laws. There are those who saw the protest as an opportunity to kick the government in power out of power. And you could see that in some parts of northern Nigeria, they kept asking for military rule. And then we started seeing flags. I've seen people talk about, those flags, the flag they were carrying is not Russian flag, right, but the flag of the Nigerian forces. Nigerians always find a way to rationalize all kinds of oddities. People were interviewed, and they kept saying, Russia, please come to our aid. And you come and you were telling us that, oh, the flag that they were carrying was the flag of the Nigerian Armed Forces. I don't understand how people think in this manner. When those interviewed kept saying, we want Russia to come and help us. And why were they thinking that Russia could come to our aid? They've seen what has happened in some of the countries bordering Nigeria. Look at Niger. You cannot dismiss the influence of Russia in Niger. You cannot dismiss the influence of Russia in Mali. And it is spreading. Some of our people in northern Nigeria have cousins in Niger Republic. And that was why at the time when Ajaokuta and other ECOWAS leaders felt, look, let's use military option to kick the Nigerian coup plotters out of power. Let's impose sanctions on Niger. It didn't sit well with many of our brothers, our friends in the north, because they felt that sanctions on Niger Republic will ultimately affect them. Nigeria has extensive borders with Niger Republic more than any other country. Our border with Cameroon is a very small one. I mean, with Chad, it's a very small one. But the border with Niger Republic stretches more than 700 kilometers, beginning from Kebbi in the northwest to Yobe in the northeast. So definitely we interact with them a lot, and they didn't find it funny. But there are some of them who felt nostalgic about military rule. And there are those who felt, okay, since it happened in Niger Republic, it happened in Burkina Faso, it happened in Mali, why not Nigeria? And they were saying it was clear, yet you come and deceive yourself that, oh, they were carrying Nigerian forces flag. Why are we like this as a people?
You know,
So,
but, okay.
And that is why you see soldiers in the course of the protest, soldiers driving through town, they will be telling them that it's you we want. Kumukeso. Kumukeso means it's you we want. Mulkin soldier Mukeso is the government of the soldiers that we want. They were quite clear. And I believe that some of those things that those young people were saying were put in their mouths. We've seen now that even during the protest, some people were paid money to protest. There is a boy who comes to my house. He's been a long-time helper. He told me he was paid 3,000 naira per day to protest here in Lagos.
But let's not forget that there is a germane issue on
No, just wait.
Okay.
Just wait. There's a reason why I said that.
Right.
There are people with ulterior motives. Nobody is saying there's no hunger. I'm not the sort of person who will come here and say that our people deserve to be this hungry. No. I would rather invite God to take me away than come to a place like this and not say the truth. No. That day will not come. That day will not come when I will see the truth and I'll run away from it. No, I'm too old for that. I'm too old, and character transplant at old age is not possible. Maybe in future the Western world will come up with a method by which they can transplant character.
I don't think that could ever be possible.
So I cannot change. There is hunger in the land. I said it yesterday that the most popular word in Nigeria today is hardship. So I know that there's a reason for people to protest.
Right.
It's legitimate.
Record straight.
Nobody ever, even yesterday I said that. But stop calling looting protest. It's not protest.
Right.
A lot of what we saw in the north was not protest, was barefaced looting.
Okay.
So, and there were also people behind the scene who were paying money to people to make sure that they protested, in the hope that the protest would trigger the sort of change in government that we've seen in some countries. It happened in Egypt. So people may then think, if they were able to chase a dictator away in the season of the Arab Spring through protest,
right,
why not? Why don't we try it in Nigeria? So don't kid yourself that behind the scenes, some people were not making moves.
Right.
I've lived in a country, and as a historian, I know that all the coups that we've had, the military coups that we've had, civilians have connived with the military.
Right.
Usually when they lose election and they are bitter, they are not happy, they go and encourage the military to take over.
Yeah.
I dare anybody to challenge me that I lied on this. And I will mention some civilians who took part in military coups.
All right, Kay, let's have your take on this, especially as the concerns that the vote of confidence being passed on the Council of State is questionable because of the current situation the country is facing.
You know, one thing I want to do is not to rehash some of the things he had said, because I'm in sync with, if not all, everything he had said. And one thing I was going to point out was when you tried to interject and he hit the nail on the head, which is the right to protest. And so for me, when the president was addressing the nation, there's one key thing I was looking out for, and he gave it. But a lot of people actually didn't see that. And that's the issue of what are the clear plans, what are the immediate plans to attending to the problem of hunger. And he talked about, you know, removing these duties on these staple foods and stuff like that, because that's exactly what people want to hear. And you can even see that we're beginning to see, you know, some kind of positive effect in the market. So for me, that's what Nigerians, legitimate protesters, it's important we underline that word. Those people who actually protest because they want a change in their situation,
Right.
not change of government. So that's why I do not want to take those things for granted. Those warnings from the military agents, the security agents who were saying that we have intels that this protest was going to be hijacked. And so they were proving right. It was so clear that a whole lot of interest are waiting on the flanks. And don't forget how politicians, it is expected. Ideally, I wasn't really surprised. Oppositions are always, looking for every opportunity to make any government in power unpopular. They're always looking for any opportunity to delegitimize any government in power. So what do you expect the government in power to do? They're never going to, sit back and watch, something that they could control.
Right.
So when they ask you, supply your details, why can't you supply those details? And those people who came to the front had to shout, can you make this protest one day? Because they've also seen that if anything goes wrong or worse than what has happened, they are going to be held accountable. Yeah. So why do you want to protest and you don't want to submit your details? So that gave us a whole lot of, reason to question the rationale behind this. So for me, for you to have 4 former heads of states and presidents, attend an event and trust journalists the way they coin it and say, oh, Obasanjo snubbed. Whether you snubbed or you didn't snub, the most important thing is that the majority were part, the governors were part of that decision. So for me, I think it's a legitimate call to say that they pass a vote of confidence. It is now left for them to follow through as advisory body, to follow through with the president, that let us see up to date on your plans to solve this problem of hunger. Nobody, for every deep minds, they're following up with the plans. We want to see a long-time solution to some of our problems. There's no need staying on what other past presidents have been saying. We are going to remove subsidy, we are going to do this, we are going to do this, and somebody has taken that step. And it never pretended that it's going to come with some pains. But how long can Nigeria wait for that pains to be over is what we should follow up and not necessarily stay on the streets.
Absolutely. Fine place to leave it, gentlemen. Thank you so much for that insight. Well, we need to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be speaking with the Minister of Steel Development, Shuaibu Abubakar. That will be in just a moment. Stay with us.
The National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons, NCFRMI, in collaboration with Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, invites the general public to the official flag-off of planting of the Renewed Hope Agri-Empowerment Project of Internally Displaced Persons, ReHappy, in Bassa, Plateau State. Under the distinguished chairmanship of Senator Abubakar Kyari, CON, Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, and co-chairmanship of Honorable Tijani Aliyu Ahmed, Honorable Federal Commissioner, NCFRMI. Date, Friday, 16 August 2024. Venue, behind Khartoum University, VOM, and Kwasho Village, behind College of Accountancy, Kwal, Bassa Local Government Council. Time, 11 a.m. Announcer, Chief Samuel Pukat, CEO, PS Food Masters Nigeria Limited, Project Consultant.
Wires and cables on. Come and come back, light up your life. Come and want to light up your house. Come and want to give you better. Come and extraordinary wonder. Come and cables speed up. Come and wires speed up. Come and quality. Come and durable. Come and cable. Come and cables speed up. Come and wires speed up. Come and quality. Come and durable. Come and cable. Everybody.
Coleman Wires and Cable. Great quality. Now with the new look.
Established by the Shehu Shagari government in 1979, the Ajaokuta Steel Company, among other things, was created to fast-track industrial development of Nigeria. The steel plant, located in Ajaokuta in Kogi State, north-central Nigeria, sits on the 24,000 hectares of land with about 43 units. However, what was meant to be a major driver of economic growth for the country remains comatose 40 years after its conception due to various challenges. In line with the renewed hope agenda of the current administration, which seeks to diversify the economy, President Bola Tinubu has harped on the need to revitalize the steel company. And with the establishment of the Ministry of Steel Development in 2023, efforts are in top gear more than ever before to bring Ajaokuta Steel back to life. Well, joining us now for more insights on the future of Ajaokuta Steel Company is the Honorable Minister of Steel Development, Shaibu Abubakar Audu. Thank you so much for joining us on the program Journalist Hangout. So first off now, the 21st of August, it will be exactly, good to have you, it will be exactly 1 year of the inauguration of President Tinubu's cabinet. So how will you describe the journey so far as one of the ministers?
Thank you very much, Esther and team. It's been a tough journey, but it's been a journey full of opportunities and a lot of renewed hope for Nigerians. Like you mentioned, the Ajaokuta Steel Plant, which you mentioned, which is a core component of my ministry, was established in 1979, about 45 years ago. But for the first time in 4.5 decades, there's been a sole focus on reviving the steel industry through the creation of the Ministry of Steel Development. It has given it renewed impetus. It has given it renewed hope. We've put significant measures in place, which I will talk about over the course of this interview to tell Nigerians what exactly President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, is doing under the renewed hope agenda through my Ministry of Steel Development to turn around the steel industry and allow it to reach its full potential.
So let's talk about your life now as an investment banker. How did that prepare you for this job as a Minister of Steel Development?
Thank you very much. I worked in a leading investment bank for over 20 years. It was the biggest bank in Africa, part of the biggest bank in Africa by assets and profitability. as well as the leading investment bank in Nigeria. My work as the Minister of Steel Development involves a lot of financial engineering. You know, having a financial background helps you to navigate a lot of, you know, a lot of the process and things that you have to do across various ministries. You know, so to be able to get the steel industry back on track, to be able to revive Ajaokuta and all the core components, you need a lot of financing. You know, you need to be able to have the exposure and the experience of talking to investors, understanding their mindset, both local and foreign investors. And you need to be able to put a deal on the table that is in the best interest of Nigeria, where at the end of the day, that deal will create millions of job opportunities for Nigerians. It would bring significant amount of foreign direct investments into Nigeria, and it would help to grow the GDP of Nigeria and continue to allow us to be not just a leading economy in Africa, but one of the leading economies in the world. So I have tapped into, you know, my financial experience, investment banking, wealth management, corporate and investment banking experience over the last 20 years to enable me to navigate this new assignment fairly well. But not just the financial part. In terms of leadership, is all about managing people. You know, I manage hundreds of people. The institution I worked in had thousands of staff. I was one of the you know, top leaders in the organization, and I had experience in managing people, understanding their pulse, and to be able to get people to deliver on assignments for you on your behalf. So those experiences has been quite useful.
Right, point taken there. So, but Nigeria, we understand, has a lot of potential in steel sector. But as the minister in charge now, how do you think the country can maximize steel development?
Thank you very much. I agree the steel industry has huge potential. In my view, based on my analysis and based on the numbers I've seen, the steel industry, I would say, would be worth in excess of $100 billion if you look at the combined you know, steel plants, both public and private, that we have in Nigeria, as well as the value chain, you know, across board. The $100 billion industry, or in excess of that. Now, part of what we're doing to turn around the steel industry is to, like I mentioned earlier, focus on, you know, turning around some of the key things in the government-owned steel plants. Let's take Ajaokuta, the primary steel plant in Nigeria, Ajaokuta. You know, we've done about, you know, 4 or 5 things, which, we've done over the last year to turn around that industry quite aggressively. We have engaged with various partners, both local and foreign partners, to try to secure the required financing to be able to revive Ajaokuta. Part of what we've done, we've looked at the blueprint of the steel plant. We're talking to the original equipment manufacturers, the original builders of Ajaokuta, to gauge their interest in coming back to help us to raise the required financing to be able to revive Ajaokuta. And that the conversations is at very advanced levels. You know, we're talking to the Russians. I'll be paying a visit to Moscow in the next few weeks to further that conversation. But we're not just talking to just the original equipment manufacturers. We're also talking to even the, you know, Americans, you know, the UNIDO guys, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which is, you know, a U.S. institution, has done a rapid assessment of Ajaokuta and their reports have been quite interesting. We're engaging them to see the opportunities there. Basically, Ajaokuta, the solution has to be a phased approach where some of the low-hanging fruit, some of the plants and production units that can be revived, such as the light section mill, such as, the wire rod mill, the lime calcination plant. Ajaokuta is so vast that, it can even be used to produce, even cement, outside of steel. And things like the thermal power plant. So there are various phased approach that can be used to revive some of these entities and some of these production units. We're having very, serious, advanced discussions. Now this is where the rubber meets the road. We want to establish and determine who exactly can help Nigeria and Nigerians to get this plant running. We've looked at our history. There's been a lot of, bad history about Ajaokuta. Some of the things, I guess would also be mentioned in the course of the interview. But, Mr. President is not deterred. He means business. He means to turn around Ajaokuta. I'm confident we would turn around Ajaokuta. The other people that we're talking to, the Chinese have also shown interest. Even the Ukrainians have shown interest. There's also local production capacity and local steel producers that have also shown interest. So we have seen massive interest in Ajaokuta. But like I mentioned, we would look at all the options, and based on the seriousness, the ability, because now it's not just about talking and making promises. You have to be able to deliver for Nigeria and Nigerians. Once we're able to establish that and make a determination, I would then present the options to Mr. President, where Mr. President will make a final decision as to the way forward. But like I mentioned, Mr. President is very determined to turn around Ajaokuta, and I'm very confident that we would achieve that, and we would make significant progress before the end of the first term of this administration. The second thing that we're doing with respect to Ajaokuta is today I was at the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Center with the Minister of Defense for State. Today is the 60th anniversary of Defense Industry Corporation of Nigeria, DICON, and we're very serious about a partnership between the Ministry of Steel Development, which Ajaokuta falls under, and the Ministry of Defense, where DICON falls under, to form a partnership to build a military-industrial complex within the Ajaokuta region. Like you mentioned at the start of your program, so it sits on 24,000 hectares. Only 800 hectares is being used by the steel plant. So there's over 23,000 hectares of available land, which is almost the size of Abuja. So a lot can be done. All the resources there can help us to move Nigeria to the next level. There's an engineering workshop that we're working on revamping. Once that plant is revamped, helmets can be produced there, rifles, bullets, components for tanks, military equipment and hardwares can be produced there. Then the last thing that I'll mention, which is also very critical, is I've also had a discussion with Mr. President that based on the vast land and availability of space in Ajaokuta, that it's important to set up an industrial complex, which Mr. President wants us to implement. So I've asked my team in the ministry, including the Executive Secretary of the National Steel Council, the MD of Ajaokuta, some of my technical advisors, to put together a blueprint for an industrial park very, very quickly that would encompass two very important components. One is a free trade zone. Some of that portion of the industrial park will be dedicated to a free trade zone. There would also be a section that would also house a CNG park as well. Mr. President has shown his desire to basically move away from, PMS to CNG because of the cost savings, up to 60% savings, like the president made at his last speech, would be benefited by moving to CNG. And Mr. President wants 1 million CNG vehicles on the road by 2027 in the next 3 years. So we have a lot of plans for Ajaokuta, and we're very confident that Mr. President will revive Ajaokuta within the shortest possible time, and Nigerians would smile again.
Okay. In the year 2020, the federal government announced that it was going to revive the project, and that by the year 2023, it will have put the project to bed. Why has it been difficult for successive governments to revive the Ajaokuta steel company after all the money that we spent to build such a gigantic steel complex? And the second, following from that, my other question is, the Russians are quite good at building something like this. In fact, originally they helped the Indians, who are today very big in steel production, to set up their steel plants. Are you looking at going back to the people who built the project originally, or looking in the direction of other countries for help?
Thank you very much. Part of the challenge that Ajaokuta has had over, I would say, the last, 45 years, 4.5 decades, has been the lack of political will. If you see the issue that we had in 2023, where almost $500 million was paid out as a settlement to GINL, the Indian company, is a very unfortunate situation for Nigeria. That amount of money could have gone a very, very long way in reviving the entire steel plant. So these are some of the, unfortunate history that we see in this country. However, the president has a different mindset. Sometimes, you can decide to dwell on the past and not move forward. Mr. President has come to say that he has drawn a line. This is a renewed hope agenda where things must be done properly in the interest of Nigerians. And he has put in place measures to ensure that things significantly improve. So what I would say is the key reason why we haven't made significant progress in Ajaokuta is, the lack of political will and so much inefficiency and corruption in the system, in the past. But things have turned around and are looking very, very different. In terms of who we're talking to, whether we're going to go ahead with the Russians, what I would say is, Mr. President would ultimately look at what delivers the best value for Nigeria and would make the ultimate call. But the people that we're talking to, which I already mentioned earlier, are very serious-minded people. They have put various proposals on the table, but we're just not looking at the proposals. We want to ask the questions. Where the financiers coming from? Do they have the capacity? Do they have the share capital? Do they have the required equity? How quickly can they move from, stage 1 to stage 2? How long do we need to revive some of the low-hanging fruits in the first phase of the revival process whether we want to revive 3, 4, 5 plants. How long is that going to take? Nigerians are impatient. The president is impatient. And we have to be able to deliver value in a way that, Nigerians, would look back and be satisfied with the leadership and their leaders. So those are the things that what we're looking at. But like I mentioned, UNIDO has done a rapid assessment under the US guys, and we'll look at who is most serious, who has the best capacity, and how best we can make it work. We know what we want. We know the capacity of Ajaokuta, and we're confident that we can deliver steel and make Ajaokuta work and turn around the steel industry.
I want to ask you, how many times have you visited the plant since you became minister, and how did you feel seeing overgrown weeds all over the place and disused heavy equipment? How exactly did you feel?
Yes, I've visited the plant since I've been minister, but not just while I was minister that I started to visit the plant. Ajaokuta is actually on the way to my village. You can't get to my village without going through Ajaokuta. So Ajaokuta is, is in my community pretty much. A few kilometers away from my village in Ogbonicha in Kogi State. You have to go through, Ajaokuta. So I see Ajaokuta all the time. I'm very familiar with his environs. I did a thorough tour of Ajaokuta. I went into, some of the workshops. I went into some of the, lime calcination plants. I saw the blast furnace. I've seen the vast array of land in Ajaokuta, and I'm convinced there's huge potential. And I think that although it's been a very, very difficult assignment over the last 45 years to turn it around, but like I mentioned, I'm very, very confident that the president this time around would change the story by the grace of God.
Okay, Honorable Minister, I was even going to just say that maybe the word we should use for you should not even be visit, since it's your state. And one unique thing about it is that the president, this current administration, has actually unbundled what we have seen before, where you combine the steel and mining together. So people will expect a lot, especially from you, focusing on this particular sector. But can you help us? Because a lot has been said. I think I was born around that time when this was built, and a lot of things have been said, and people seem to have described it as a white elephant project. So, and some of the things they said is been plagued by delays, corruption, and lack of funding or sabotage. Even that may not be the right word you used. But what would you say is the biggest challenge facing this steel complex? How do we really come out? Because if the report I read is right, we understand maybe just about 1/4 is in use. What happens to the 3/4, and when do we really come out of this quagmire that we found ourselves?
I think the Ajaokuta issue is a complex problem. A lot of steel is being produced, across Europe, across Africa. We're importing, about $4 billion worth of steel into Nigeria. So getting, looking at all those parameters and getting Ajaokuta to be revived is not such an easy task. It's a task that has to be managed delicately because of all the geopolitical issues. But, I know that we can reach a good landing. I would say that the biggest challenge with Ajaokuta that we're seeing now is funding. The place requires a lot of funds. Part of my next trip would be to examine, the capacity of the partners to be able to provide the required funding. And the funding would be, based on milestones and things like that. So hopefully we should be able to get things off the ground very significantly. But like I mentioned, part of what we need to do is raise the funding, get the technical expertise, and also get the local engineers to help us. There are a lot of local engineers within Ajaokuta Steel Complex that are very competent people. I've interacted with some of them. Some of them are highly intelligent, highly experienced, and they can help us get off the ground. And as usual, let me give an example. It's like, you go for the Paris Olympics. It's your first time in Paris, and you get there, and you start driving all over the place by yourself. You need a tour guide to help you and direct you and take you to your destination. So, the engineers in there, within the Ajaokuta, steel complex, are some of the, tour guides that would help the, expertise that is brought in to be able to get us to the ultimate destination.
Okay, Honorable Minister, there were also reports that the word is idle Ajaokuta workers got about 38.9 billion naira salaries in 10 years. What's actually the true situation regarding this matter?
Yes, I saw the report. It was an allegation laid by a senator from Kogi Central. We also saw the response from the unions in Ajaokuta, and what I would say is that the system is not perfect. There are a lot of gaps in the system that requires to be fixed, like all government bureaucracies. But about 10 years ago, we had about 3,200 staff in Ajaokuta. Right now, 10 years later, the staff strength has reduced by about 50% to about 1,600. Right? Now, government, workers, sometimes is not so easy to lay them off or to create redundancies. But what I would say, or what I would clarify, is that a lot of the staff, are actually doing some work in Ajaokuta. And I'll give you an example. Ajaokuta is built on a river bank of River Niger and River Benue. A lot of water goes underground into the underground pipes of Ajaokuta. If you don't have engineers that are draining that water constantly, the plant would sink. So it's important to have engineers that are there to look after some of those challenges. If you look at the mechanical equipments in there, some of them, you need to run them periodically to ensure that, it's like once you park a car, if you don't start it completely, the battery will run down, the car will run down entirely. But, you need to start the car, every other day or every day to make sure that, the car is still functional. If you look at some of the electrical equipments, even the hospital facilities, a lot of accidents that happen around the Ajaokuta environs from Lokoja, from the Kogi axis. They are rushed into the hospitals, in Ajaokuta, and they've helped to save many lives. So I think it's too simplistic to say, Ajaokuta, they are not doing anything. But I agree that, it's something that needs to be looked into. There are ways to improve the system, and the system, must be improved. And, one thing that is important to clarify, the 38.9 or let's say 40 billion that was paid to staff is not being paid to Ajaokuta Steel Complex. It's being handled by, the head of service and the IPPS system, that handles payments to staff. So nobody has taken that 40 billion and handed it to the, the management team of Ajaokuta to manage on behalf of anybody. So I just wanted to lay that. Yes.
All right, let me quickly ask this question before we let you go. Now, let's talk about other steel companies like the Alaja and Oshogbo. How are those companies faring? Give us a little bit of that.
And then recently there are protests across the country. What's your take on those protests?
Okay. Thank you. Those are two very important questions. Just quickly, as part of my tour of all the agencies and all the government-owned steel plants, I visited some of the steel rolling mills in Jos. I know the situation of the steel rolling mill in Alaja, in Katsina. When I went to Jos steel rolling mill, it was a very sad state. It was shut down. It's under lock and keys. It's not working. It's not functional. The same thing with Alaja is under lock and keys. Katsina is somewhat working, but is nowhere near full capacity. Alaja is also, not functional. So I think what I've done is I've asked my team to write to the BPE to make a request for the, share sale agreements of the privatization that was done under the Obasanjo administration for us to review that. Part of the options that we're looking at is, some investors have bought the plant and have shut it down, and it's not serving the interest of Nigerians. Jobs have been lost, no FDI is coming in, no value is being added. So if, as a government ministry, we can engage potential investors that, can bring in funding, and, the owners, under the share purchase agreement, can review and see if they are willing to partner or sell some equity stake to potential investors that can bring in some funding to turn around, those steel rolling mills. So like I mentioned, is a difficult task, but we're thinking outside the box and working very hard to resolve those situations. Now, the protest is a very important question. Nigerians have complained of hunger and rightly so. And some of those complaints are legitimate, but as you mentioned, there's been some miscreants and some unruly elements that have tried to hijack that protest for a regime change, which is very unfortunate and which hasn't worked. Thank God. But some of the decisions and all the decisions Mr. President has made has been tough decisions, but that are absolutely essential and required for Nigeria to function. Let me give you an example. When Mr. President came and he removed the fuel subsidy as well as liberalized the FX regime, as a country, we're paying $10 billion annually on subsidies, which is 16 trillion naira. So we're paying about 1.5 trillion naira every month as subsidy payment. The country could not afford it. The country was on the verge of bankruptcy. Mr. President mentioned that 97% of the revenue that was generated by the government was used to service debt. So debt to revenue ratio was 97%. Within 1 year, these reforms that Mr. President has put in place has reduced that dramatically by 30% to 68%. You know, the government revenue has increased to about 9.1 trillion naira, which is, you know, over 50% of what it was last year. The states have been giving, you know, on an aggregated basis, over 570 billion. So Mr. President is putting measures in place. He has given authorization for the imports of 500,000 metric tons of both wheat and grain to reduce the pressure on the cost of some of these essential commodities. And we're seeing, you know, some of these measures, we're seeing positive effect. So the price of tomatoes have crashed. And I think on the protests as well, it's important, you know, to give credit to, people they use from my home state who jettisoned the idea of a protest because of engagements that have been ongoing between the youths and senior members and leadership of, you know, the All Progressive Congress. The governor did a great job in trying to mitigate the protest. You know, I also engaged, you know, the youths across board. I brought in, part of the federal government initiative, which impacted more than 5,000 co-guides in terms of the nano businesses that paid, 50,000 across board, distributed rice and things like that. So we're on the right path. Thank you.
Absolutely. I can't agree any more or less. Thank you so much for your insights. Honorable Minister of Steel Development, Shuaibu Abubakar Audu, for sharing your insights on efforts of the current administration to revive Ajaokuta Steel Company, among other topical matters. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
And that's our show for today on Journalist Hangout. Join us again tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can watch a repeat broadcast of it tonight at 11. Join us again on Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. And before I go, let me thank my guests in the studio as usual, Kayode Ladende and Babajide Kolade Otitoju. Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. And that's it. Thank you for watching. I'm Esther Makwarela. Bye for now, and God bless Nigeria.